But this is going to be your most upfront cost. You may have to dump the most money into these components, and you may be upside down in your trailer quicker than you think. There are some hub axle setups that have been obsoleted. You can't get parts for it. You can't get brakes for it. Don't buy that, or if you do, you need to make sure you buy it at the right price in order to do an axle replacement. Plug, jack, coupler, wheels, tires. You can be in a new trailer pretty fast. What to look for when possibly purchasing a used trailer. We're going to talk about specifically utility trailers, equipment trailers, whether they be bumper pull or gooseneck. We won't be covering livestock, cargo, or RV. We'll be doing videos on those coming soon, so be looking for that. There's some of the stuff will interchange no matter what type of trailer, but those are very specific units, and there's very specific things that I look for when looking at a used trailer. So you want to make sure you do your homework, want to make sure you give it a good visual inspection. Just don't look at just the price, but make sure that you don't make a bad purchase. So hopefully after the video today, that will help you with that. So the first area I'm going to look at when looking at a used trailer is the running gear, whether that be single axle, tandem dual. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to do the best visual inspection I can do. One thing I'd recommend taking with you is a flashlight, mini pocket flashlight, just something so you can see up underneath it. So let's run back to the running gear and see what we can find. The reason I'm going to start with this area, if looking at a used trailer, if someone is not going to do their maintenance, this is where all the maintenance needs to happen, but many times it gets overlooked or hidden. Your frame and that kind of stuff, we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but this is going to be your most upfront cost. You may have to dump the most money into these components, and you may be upside down in your trailer quicker than you think. So the first thing we'll look at is the tires. I'm going to see the tire tread, tire condition. I'm going to look at the sidewalls. I'm going to look at the age of the tires. If the tires are bad and need to be replaced right away, even with the 15-inch tire, you're going to spend anywhere from, $500 on up. So that can change, that can make that good deal you look at. And that's the other thing I would say. If you see a great deal on a used trailer, buyer beware, make sure you do your homework. I would say there's not a lot of great deals on trailers anymore. There's some good deals. Many times a used trailer is going to start half the price of what a new replacement's worth. Many times you're going to buy a used trailer today and you're going to give more money for that used trailer depending on what age and what year it was built than it costs new, just due to the way the market is right now on them. So I'm going to look at the tires first. Then I'm going to shake the tire to check for bearing wear. If it needs to be repacked, I'm just simply going to put my hands on here and see if I can feel any wobble. I can hear any wobble in that. If it is a tandem dual trailer or a larger trailer, you may not be able to do that. That's really only going to work on your single axle trailer and your tandem axle trailers that are going to be 16 inches and down. But if you feel play in here, at very minimum, it's going to need a bearing repack. So if you're going to have to pay to get that done, you're going to spend some dollars on that. If you're going to DIY it, do it yourself, you can check our videos out on that. You're still maybe going to have to buy some bearings, races, and some components. The other thing I'm going to look for is the suspension, and that's where your flashlight is going to come in handy. I'm going to start with the equalizer if it's a spring suspension. I'm going to take a look at the equalizer to make sure if I see any oblonging in the shackle bolts, if I see any oblonging in any of these components, or if this equalizer, whether it's this style or the larger boxed equalizer like for 7K axles and up, to make sure it's not all the way up against the frame because it's worn out. The thing that's going to be the hardest to look at visually, unless it is a tandem dual, is how much brake shoe it has, or how much brake pad if it's running a disc setup. 10K and up, you can crawl underneath. There is an inspection plate behind there. It's going to have a little notch that you can shine a flashlight in to see the thickness of the shoe. You're not going to be able to do that on 8K and down for the most part. The way I like to look at that is take my flashlight, shine it through the wheel, and look at the drum. If it looks like the drum has been roasted, if you see a lot of rust, scaling from overheating, any white, bluing, heavy discoloration, you're going to see some. Brakes get hot. When brakes work correctly, they're going to get hot. But I'm going to look at that, and if it looks like it's been burned up, I'm just going to put in my mind, I'm probably going to have to do a brake job on this. Now, whether or not that brake job includes brake backing assembly and drum, you're not going to know that until you tear it down. So be aware of that. If you don't have brakes on there, then that's not a concern. Just do your wiggle test. The other thing that's really important, I'm going to check the age of the trailer. If it's pre-1992, there are some hub axle setups that have been obsoleted. You can't get parts for it. You can't get brakes for it. If you look underneath the trailer, which I'm going to show you here in a little bit, to look at the axle, and we'll cover that, there's some things to look for that you may not be able to get components for, and you're going to have to do an axle replacement. So if you have to buy tires, brakes, drums, or do an axle replacement, you're not talking about hundreds of dollars at that point. You're over the $1,000 mark on that, and so that's going to add to what the value of the trailer is worth. You just have to weigh it, whether it's worth putting the money into this or a new one. I will say, just going out and buying a new one, all those items are still going to wear, so at some point you're still going to have to put money into that. But take that flashlight, look around. If you can, crawl underneath. And let me say this, if you're dealing with somebody that's selling this, you need to ask their permission before you crawl all over the trailer. Don't take anything apart on it. Ask if you can do an inspection. Ask if you can have a mechanical inspection done on it. There's some shops that will provide that for a certain fee. You can bring the trailer in, just like buying a used car. You can do a mechanical inspection, kind of see what's wrong with it, just to get a better baseline. That way, if maybe there's some negotiation. If it has easy lube caps, where this one doesn't, it has just a solid dust cover, ask permission if you can take the cap off and look inside to see what the condition of the grease looks like. See if there's any water, see if there's any rust, see if somebody's welded the nut of the spindle to the spindle. Why would they do that? Sometimes people will lose, we see it all the time, they'll lose a hub, and to do a throw together repair, they'll put the nut back on, get it as tight as they can, then they'll weld that nut because there's not enough threads on there to hold it, just to get them by. Don't buy that, or if you do, you need to make sure you buy it at the right price in order to do an axle replacement. And that's not out of the question. If you buy the trailer right, you can put axles, tires, you can do all that and still have a good unit. So you're going to look up underneath. If it's a spring axle suspension, look at the axle beam. Make sure it's not had any welding done. Believe it or not, sometimes people will get an axle that's the wrong size. They'll cut it in the middle, put it together, and just do a butt weld on there instead of sleeving it. I'm not saying sleeving is okay, but a sleeved axle is going to be better than a butt welded axle. If it's butt welded, you're going to need a new axle on that. So look to see if there's any type of modification to that axle underneath. While you're underneath there, look at the U-bolts, do a better inspection on the spring. Just look around, see if anything looks out of place, out of sorts, like it's been thrown together. While you're underneath there, you can also do a visual of the frame. Look to see if any of the cross members are bowed. Many times a trailer will be overloaded, and we call it tacoing. Basically the subframe is bowed. They'll stick a new floor in it and won't screw the boards all the way down to the center, and it looks level on the top, but you're tacoed on the bottom, which what that does, that pulls the trailer in and puts abnormal stress on the suspension components and cause them to wear out prematurely. And you've compromised the trailer at that point. It's going to need some type of repair, whether that's added support or replacement of those supports. So this area here for me is the biggest area I'm going to look at, and I'm going to crawl underneath it. You know, if you're worried about getting dirty, maybe get you, a soft creeper that you can take, a feed sack, whatever you've got to crawl underneath it, to take a look to make sure that you're not going to have to, dump $1,000 day one to get it roadworthy. Many times this is the most overlooked. You'll look at the lights and that kind of stuff, and we're going to do that, and we'll talk about it here shortly. We're going to move up to the front of the trailer at this point. Now we're back up at the front. The other things to look at are the trailer coupler, safety change, any of the equipment up front. You can check if it's like the Bulldog style coupler. You can simply open the collar, check this to see if it will move freely, and make sure it's not super loose. If this wiggles up and down a lot, the pin is worn, coupler's likely worn, may or may not need to be replaced at that point. If it doesn't close, may just need to have some lubrication done. Check your safety chains, look at the jack. This isn't a ton of money, but it all adds up. It's like if you go in and light bulbs aren't expensive, but if you got to change every light bulb in your house, it will give you some sticker shock once you complete that. Same thing on here. If you got to start putting safety chains, plug, jack, coupler, wheels, tires, you can be in a new trailer pretty fast. So be aware of that. Look at the breakaway system. If it has brakes on it, that's going to cost you another 50 or 60 bucks. Just look around. The other thing to look for, look to see if it's got any mixed matched paint on it. So if it's got a different color of red. Let's run to the back and I'll show you what I mean. So here we've got red oxide primer against the original color of the trailer. You want to know why that's happened. Well, if you look here, it was actually done here for an upgrade. We had new light boxes put on here, upgraded lights. So that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. Or it would be a bad thing if you're looking anywhere on the structure. Maybe you're looking around the fenders, the uprights, and you see mixed match paint fresh primer, anything like that, a weld or a crack may be being covered up. If they've done the correct repair and you see a great weld in there and they've covered it up with paint or primer, that's not a bad thing. That repair has already been made for you, but just be aware. Look for different color paints, fresh paint, fresh primer. I will tell you, when we move into the livestock trailer, we will really go into depth on that, but I'm always skittish of fresh primer. Fresh primer and a set of chrome wheels will sell anybody about anything. You can sell ice to an Eskimo on there, so be aware of that. Check for fresh paint, fresh primer, mix match paint. Sometimes it's a good thing. Here they've upgraded the boxes on here. That's money that you don't have to spend and you have some better lights. Another area to check out is going to be your flooring, especially if it's a wood floor. Check the condition of the flooring. See if it's had motor oil or diesel or anything poured over it to weatherproof it, but more importantly, see if they poured that over it to make an old floor look a little newer. If it's got paint, anything like that on it. This floor here, as you can see, it is in need of a new floor, and that's what it will be coming in for. This board here has shrunk to the point to where it's pushed through the rear support, and if you're loading a piece of equipment that's wider out here, that could break off and you could have a tire fall through. This is the original floor to the trailer. This is an older trailer. I don't remember the year model on this, but most of the boards in here need to be replaced. We would not do a partial replacement of this. This is gonna be a full tear out, full floor replacement on that. If you want to know what's entailed on that, you can check out our trailer flooring video. We'll leave that in the description. We'll leave a link to that. And we'll leave links to some other areas, you know, if you want to DIY your suspension or DIY the axle, so whether or not you're going to be able to do that, or if you're going to have to pay and cover the cost of a shop to do that, just so you can figure that into your price. The biggest thing is, if you see what you think is a good deal, just be careful. And this is going to depend on what state you're living in. In our state, in Texas, it's very important. Make sure it's got good paperwork on that. And what I mean by that, make sure it's got an MSO or a title. If you don't have an MSO or a title, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to get registration and title work on it, but you're going to have to go through some hoops to get it. You're going to have to deal with the state at some point. You may have to have a theft inspection to make sure that that trailer has not been turned in for insurance fraud, or if it's been stolen. If you take that for that inspection and they find that it has been totaled, insurance fraud, or if it's been stolen, you're going to lose that trailer at that time. The state is going to seize that trailer and you're going to be out the trailer and your money. You won't get your money back. So in our state, it's not every state. I know there's some states that you're not required to have a title. You're not required to register it. You can just kind of just pull it however you want to. I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree. I'm just telling you, in some states, make sure you do your registration homework before you go out and purchase that used trailer. If you don't have the right documentation, it may be an uphill battle in order for you to get registration and get the trailer into your name. Really, one of the last things I'm going to look at, not that it's not important, but it's not the, to me, in my opinion, in most cases, not going to be the most costly repair or upgrade. I'm going to look at the lighting. You can see this one here has new lighting. I will say, just because it has new lighting, that's not always a plus. They may have put the cheapest lighting possible on there to get it by. But if you're going to make that purchase and you're going to pull it down the road the day you purchase it, you need to make sure all the lights work. So do a visual inspection on the lights, the wiring, the plug, anything associated with that. But at the end of the day, if the lights and wiring is the only thing wrong with it, many of you can DIY that at least enough to get it home. Maybe you have a buddy that can help you with that, or you can take it to the shop. That's not going to be as costly as your flooring, as your running gear, couple replacement, frame cracking, or any of that kind of stuff. So just check that out, but that's not going to be a deal breaker for me on lights and wiring. If everything else looks good, the lights and wiring are going to be the least of my concerns. I'm going to get it good enough to get it home, then I'm going to fix that myself. Hopefully this video was helpful. It'll give you some things to look for if you're purchasing a used trailer. Remember, be sure to look out for the other videos that'll be coming out talking about livestock, cargo, RV, and be sure to check out the video links in the description below that deal with some of the DIY repairs, or to let you know what it's going to take if you have to take that into the shop. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next one.